Answer those questions.
Answer the question.
We don't care if you win or lose the game.
I don't care.
Just cover the spread. Now here's Eitan Shander.
Oh, my goodness. What a ridiculous game from a betting standpoint. What an insane game last night from a live in-game bet standpoint. If you were just watching without playing, first off, welcome if that's the case, because you aren't our target demo, but we'll take anyone and everyone across the board as we are live for the next two here. With that said, there was nothing else but betting. There was nothing else but live in-game action last night. How in the world could you just sit there, not place a bet, even if it's a 16th of a unit? I don't care what it is, how high or small the quality or quantity of the bet may be, but how else could you sit there and consume it? It's not like the commercials were keeping that game afloat. It was dud central station last night across the board outside of narratives, and narratives don't help us. Narratives, the only way, and this is where we can begin, the only time the narrative truly helped us, and us meaning those who listen to me, and I'm sure a couple of other people who push this prop nonstop now for 2 straight weeks on this program, Props and Locks on Fox 29, the other show I do with Mays and Brooks, social media, wherever anybody could hear me, I was shouting, if you are not going to take Kansas City, meaning if you are going to play the Bucs in any capacity from the points to the money line, then this was your prop. And the reason why I loved it from a betting standpoint and from a Bucs are going to win bet this standpoint was simply because of the narrative. And it's not often that the narrative will help you win a bet. Usually it has to do with futures, right? It has to do with individual awards. Let's say, for example, with, I don't know, LeBron James winning the MVP. That's huge. And we'll get to Carson Wentz and the futures that we'll set right now about where he'll go in a matter of minutes here. But from last night, where we begin with a game that was just gigantic, to trying to pin down where exactly Carson Wentz is going to go, Chicago, and for how much, the 20th first pick in the first round, we had a game from a sports betting standpoint that still shows you the reason and really the necessity of why you need some sort of companion. Now, maybe you were deep into a fantasy tournament, DFS tournament, a captain showdown. Maybe you were playing the free Kentucky Fried Chicken thing, whatever it was that you were locked into. There had to be something else. Otherwise, you were stuck watching a pretty boring game. And the one narrative that came true was Bucs win, Brady MVP, Gronk touchdown at plus 800. We begged you to take that. Because when you're betting narratives, when you're betting something like a storyline behind it, it had to do with Brady winning the MVP. You had a really good argument for people on defense, right up to the defensive coordinator winning the MVP. But you knew it was going to be Tom Brady, didn't you? You knew it was going to be Brady. That one put out also the fourth quarter tie at 750 was huge. But think about what played out in that final play of the game. Think about what truly mattered most if you had a couple of different bets across the board. The total was locked in. The under was going to hit. Didn't matter. But that's usually a scenario where Patrick Mahomes is going to lead his team to a score, especially when the defense already has a game won. And in this case, it's not just any game or any playoff game. It's the Super Bowl. So you could pretty much lock in the Chiefs were going to score at that point. Well, for those of you who remember the first show we did immediately after the championship week, I, like a fool, told you, because I wanted misery and company, to jump in Chiefs minus 167 on the money line because it's going to go up. It's going to go up. Well, it went up. It came back down, but it went up for a while. I had to make that back. So outside of the props that we gave, fourth quarter tie, the Gronk, Brady MVP, where you knew if the Bucs were going to win, Brady was going to win it, I had to make it back. So I'm banking on two things not happening. I'm banking on the Bucs on third down with the game wrapped up, not going deep to Rob Gronkowski to stop the clock and then punt it back to Mahomes after they stopped him the first time. I was kind of banking on that not to happen. And then Patrick Mahomes not scoring that touchdown at the end of the game. because I laid 20.5 on the Bucks just to try and make that money line bet back. So you may have checked out, ladies and gentlemen. You might have looked at that game thinking, well, it's one final drive. Maybe I'll just keep the TV on because I want to see the celebration, hear what Tom Brady has to say, all of that. But that interception saved a lot of people across the board from, thank you, Kyle. I mean, that was humongous. It saved my minus 20.5, where a lot of people, if you could get in middle towards the end of the fourth quarter, it was a comfortable number on a good return, plus 100, again, depending on the app. And then on top of that, the fourth quarter tie, it was huge for a lot of reasons. Wherever you had a bet that would have been impacted by that final score, of course, the total, no, but maybe you played something in game, maybe you dropped it, I don't know. Final score, I mean, anybody who had that 31-9 final score ticket, my goodness, unbelievable for that to play out. Last night proves, if it hasn't already been proven over and over and over again, that if you don't have a betting companion in some aspect, in some regard, especially in the middle of a pandemic where you shouldn't be out and about frolicking at Super Bowl parties anyway, that game was trash. It was awful. The Kansas City Chiefs, defensive shutdowns in the Super Bowl aren't fun. Yeah, they're great to bet on. Pound the under. In-game 51.5. Pound it again. I get it. We were all there last night and hopefully taking advantage of what seemed to be the most obvious thing, which is things were going to slow down in the second half. And it was really just banking on, could the Chiefs make it close, not come back? You knew at the half they weren't going to come back and win, but could they keep it close? You know, Chiefs +7 looked pretty good at one point. Chiefs +14.5, 15 looked pretty good at one point. Chiefs +20.5. I mean, think about that. That's what I had to do to sweat that sucker out at the end. And I promise you, I'm not the only one who sweat that final drive, final play, right down to the White interception. Because there were a lot of wagers focused simply on whether or not the Chiefs could add points to the board and what that would do, either add money or take money away. For me, it was major just to break even at that point. And yes, our buddy Bo 316. Tampa wins, TB MVP, Gronk touchdown, ring to register. I'm proud of that one. Look, I hit stuff not often. But we gave out a couple, and here's why I'm most proud of it, is we didn't need anybody's help. You know, we didn't need Adam Thompson's help. We didn't need the Philly Godfather's help. We didn't need Michael Calabrese crossing over to the NFL's help. We didn't need anybody else. Sharp, smart, square, whoever. We didn't need anybody's help. We organically created that one and said, look, you're essentially betting on the Bucs money line and Gronk to score. Gronk scoring a couple, just amazing. It was fun watching the game, again, depending on where you were. And we didn't hit a lot of props. There were a couple that we gave you. Leonard Fournette, 55 rushing and a touchdown. Some other ones, if you just kind of look across the board here, under on 6.5 touchdowns, as well as the under on the total. So things played out nice. And it really worked in the capacity of maximizing any type of return. Any type of return of investment. Now, some of it you lose, some of it you double down. Some things don't necessarily play out. But I'm on this one text chain. It's the only chain that I'm really on with Brooks, Mays, and Mertitas. I can go last name with all three of those guys here. The Kelsey, that was a tough one. But the one that I was arguing the most about it this week, and I can't believe that people were fighting me on this one. But there was a head-to-head matchup of Antonio Brown versus Scotty Miller. And I got crushed at first because everybody was all giddy off of that Scotty Miller broken play off Kevin King, thinking that's a sustainable strategy to just send that guy deep. It was a head-to-head versus Antonio Brown, and Antonio Brown was getting positive money. That was another one we pounded. It told you, what are you doing? Why stay away from that one? Remember, there was an interception drop that Brady could have been picked off, but the other prop under a half interceptions. PGF Godfather gave us that one. So just go under it. He got them all out the game before, and it turns out he did. That drop pick was huge, but that's the Super Bowl, man. Super Bowl, you're playing off of these bounces. Now we sit here on 6/11 in the evening here, where Carson Wentz is still a Philadelphia Eagle. We have our own futures for where he's going to land, what they may get back. Well, we have it on. We don't need the global market. No app is going to create that. So good luck holding your breath. That's why you come here. So we can create it on our own and kind of narrow it down. And whether or not you believe all of this hype and where he could go outside of these two teams in Chicago and Indianapolis, that's on you. Because there is no third team. I don't think there's a second team. Honestly, if I were to make odds right now, which we will, which we are currently, and that's what the program is. What are the odds? Fox Sports Radio, The Gambler. It's presented by Cure Auto Insurance. Good friend of the show, Bill Zimmerman from SiriusXM. Jansen's around. I'm sure he knows. Here's the thing. He is the biggest Bears honk that I know. Writes and covers for the team. And I thought if there was anybody who can give it to us from an honest perspective of, yes, the Bears need someone like Carson Wentz versus the Bears should go out and give up everything for Carson Wentz, it would be Bill. With that said, the conversation, for me at least, the conversation has everything to do with what Philadelphia is getting back. The optics of it, simply what they're getting back. If you believe, like I do, that anything less than one first-round pick, whenever it comes, this year or next year, conditional, even second into a first, although that would be disappointing if that's the only thing or the highest thing. If you are like me, then you recognize that the return has everything to do with the optics. If you can't get a first-round pick back for Carson Wentz, then this trade is a colossal failure from so many different angles. With that said, the Eagles are driven to move him because there's no way in hell that they can bring him back. There's just no way based on unless Carson Wentz has been MIA, the phone is broke, he's on some sort of like trip where for the next 8 days or 10 days, he was locked in some hunting cabin outside of where he lives in North Dakota. I don't know. Obviously, it would take something drastic like that for it to not be the optics, or at least how it comes across, which is he don't want to be here. Okay, that's fine. He doesn't want to be here. The Eagles don't want him here. Any fan of Carson Wentz should admit, if you haven't already, he shouldn't be here. You would want what's best for the guy you root for, right? Which is get him out of here. Get him to a different situation. Now, where is that situation? The odds are, and we can create three right here between the Bears, Colts, and Field. I'm not even going to give you a specific team that's been mentioned. I'm just going to allow you to bet the Field. Anywhere else outside of those two teams. And here's why, and we'll chat with Billy Z coming up in about 15 minutes, but here's why the Bears is the only destination right now. Because Ryan Pace is not Chris Ballard. Because Ryan Pace is not a guy whose A, job is hanging on by a thread, and B, somebody who's made some pretty bad decisions over and over and over again. The Indianapolis Colts haven't been fantastic, but they haven't been anywhere near as wretched with their choices and decision-making as someone like Ryan Pace and the Chicago Bears have been. Chris Ballard's job is not hanging by a thread if he doesn't get this move right of what to do with the quarterback position. Ryan Pace is. You know what that is? That's desperation. You can smell. Look, even Howie Roseman can't mess this one up. That's desperation, blood in the water. I don't care if you're a shark, whatever type of shark you may be, even a nurse shark is going to be able to smell that blood in the water. Go out there and do it exactly what you have to do, which is rip off an idiot. Go ahead. Rip off an idiot. Rip off a guy who is so desperate right now, he's going to make a stupid decision. Think about it. Apply any metaphor you can to this. This guy is desperate out in Chicago. Chris Ballard isn't. Now, here's what that desperation will get you outside of a trade, and most likely that 20th pick is that 20th pick, meaning Chris Ballard and the Indianapolis Colts, I think, have been, I hate to say successfully, but partially used as leverage to where the presentation or the idea of not dealing Carson Wentz to Chicago and now Indianapolis instead makes enough sense to Chicago where they're at least serious. Okay, look, they might take less. Let's just give up the 20th pick. That's why Indianapolis is in this deal. The talks and everything about it is because it allows Philadelphia to turn around and say, look, guys, in Chicago, you got to give us that 20th pick. Let's be honest here. Doesn't have to be anything moving forward. Doesn't have to be a first round or anything like after this year, but you kind of have to throw that 20th in. And Chris Ballard turns around and says, what? I don't care where we're drafting. I'm not throwing a first round pick in for this guy. He stinks. You're lucky that I'm taking this talk. You're lucky that we're having this Zoom call or phone call. I'm doing it out of a courtesy to somebody else in that building. That's the type of response you get when Howie Roseman initially, remember, he asked for 2 and then had to back it down. Well, what's Ryan Pace going to say? Okay, bleep you, I'm going to go trade for Jimmy Garoppolo. Bleep you, Howie, I'm going to go trade for Sam Darnold. All possibilities. But I think at that point, you are in a position where you can call that bluff. So go ahead. Go ahead. Trade for Sam Darnold. Do it. You don't want Carson Wentz, who at least has had an MVP-esque season? Go ahead. Trade for Sam Darnold. See how that works out for you. Here's my phone number. Give me a call. I'd like some updates. Maybe you can remind me about why this was such a savvy move. Or you just come at him straight on, because maybe that's the type of language that Pace and company speak, which is, are you an idiot? Is something wrong right now with you? Should we have this conversation maybe tomorrow? Are you okay? Those type of responses. You're going to go trade for Sam Darnold? Go ahead. Now, to be fair, you can make a bunch of arguments that Sam Darnold's a better trade option, maybe not necessarily quarterback, but trade option for the Bears or any other team outside of Carson Wentz. And I agree. So the Bears have to be the odds-on favorite right now. And I'm going to put him at minus 500. He's not going anywhere else. You know what? We have to add a fourth, which is stay. So the Bears are at minus 500. I think the Colts, realistically, in my mind, are somewhere around plus 400, to where it would take a catastrophic failure of communication and breakdown of a deal in order for Carson Wentz not to be dealt to Chicago. And then the Philadelphia Eagles have to come hat in hand and say, all right, let's start talking second rounders, maybe a second rounder this year and a future second or third that can turn into a second, things like that, to where you really do take it on the you-know-what. I mean, you just get bumped right there as far as a bad deal is concerned. And that might be the only situation in which, in my mind, Carson Wentz goes to the Colts. Then it's the field. And honestly, I'm going to give the field, here's why. I'm going to give the field the same odds at plus 400 as I'm going to give the Colts. Because at that point, if the Bears are out of it, and why would the Bears be out of it? Because they want to take a quarterback or move up and draft Trey Lance, or maybe they think they can get Jones at 20. I don't know, but that could be the case in which they say it's just not worth it at this point to give up the 20th for Carson. Okay, if that's not the case, then now you might be able to find a team that can give you not the deal you wanted with Chicago, but a better deal than Indy. That I don't think is out of the question. And now you're re-leveraging. You're trying to get somebody built or leveraged against Indianapolis. That might work. Realistically speaking, that could work right there. So at plus 400, I would, and then at stay, what are we talking about here? Plus 1,000? There is still a remote shot that Carson Wentz comes back. there is still a chance that Carson Wentz is an Eagle coming up next this season, but I wouldn't put my money on that. I wouldn't at all touch that, even with the value. Well, come on, Shannon, these are your own odds. These are your own odds right now at plus 1,000. To be fair, if I were going to bet anything on here, I would take the field knowing that I'm most likely going to lose that bet. But at the same pace, we have something in front of us where it's realistic. It's not a narrative that I would have bet on. It's not something that I'm banking on by any means, thinking it's going to come to fruition. That's why the Bears at minus 500. Anybody who sees these odds, they'd pass up on the global network. You wouldn't even bet this. If you did, you would take the Colts or the field. Unless you have a direct pipeline to Rob Motti from the Associated Press, who I do happen to have, mind you, I still don't think you would trust that. And Rob would have to come out and say, don't worry, he's coming back, and he hasn't. And even if he did, I wouldn't tell you. I just bet it myself and then act like a genius when that thing comes to fruition. Isn't that the move? That's what you do, right? At Shanda shows how you follow me on Twitter. All right, we're going to chat with Bill Zimmerman coming up next from SiriusXM Sports. He, of course, is the executive producer for Mad Dog Radio. For so long was the guy who kept Russo in line, but now has moved on to bigger and better things, just running that channel. He's a gigantic Bears fan. He covers the Bears as well in the media. So we're going to get a great combination from fan and media perspective from Bill. And I think it's going to be as honest as we can get out there, where it's not somebody covering the team from the standpoint of, well, this is what Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy need to do. With that said, now, before we break, I'm curious, was there a prop that you hit, Kyle, that you would like to brag about, or maybe it's the flip side and try and garner some sympathy if something busted it, especially close to the end?
Yeah, I pretty much just went 0 for 2 yesterday.
0 for 2?
Yeah,
that's it?
Yeah, on my bigger ones, I might have sprinkled a little bit here in game, but didn't do too hot. My big one, I think I might have told you last week, was plus 4,000 for Scotty Miller to score 2 touchdowns. I know you just mentioned him earlier. And
I'm shaking my head right now on the stream.
And my other one, I took the Kansas City minus 7.5 alternate line at plus 205, I think.
Not terrible. And there were a couple of props that were out there where it was, Chiefs minus 5.5, Chiefs minus 7.5. There were a couple that were minus 9.5. If you were going to take the Chiefs, it's just like the Bucks one, right? If you were going to just bet the Chiefs, then you might as well bet them big, because it wasn't going to be a 2-point game. This wasn't Butker, kicking some game winner from 60 out. You knew that the Chiefs were, if they were going to win, they were going to handle them. So I don't hate that.
Yeah, it was decent value. I figured it would be. I still figured it would be a 1-possession game. So I thought maybe 8 points or something like that. So that's why I went for the 7.5.
Yeah, the problem was you putting out your own hard-earned money, and I know how hard you work on Scotty Miller.
Yes.
I mean, my goodness, friend, what the hell is going through your mind?
I threw a tenner on there for $400 payout. It wasn't too bad.
Not terrible. I'll give you that. Not terrible at all. All right. We got some stuff happening in the second hour. Live action tonight across the board in college, the NHL, the NBA. Try and mine some value with everything we can get tonight, including, not to be outdone, right? Because I think a lot of times we have to factor in Flyers we know have been postponed, but there is one game tonight starting a little later, the 9:00 big game in college basketball, where I've already put a play in, and I'm curious because Maryland is such a shady squad to bet. And then you have the Zags. We got to get into all this tonight. The Zags at 11 o'clock tonight, only laying 10.5 at BYU. I know the University of the Pacific. They didn't cover the 20s and all of that. But 10.5, really? BYU is a good basketball team. Not great, to paraphrase a colleague of our next guest. They're okay, not great, but 10.5 on the road. Something seems off about that. A lot happening. Bill Zimmerman, Chicago Bears. He'll help us with everything, including the odds, which we've set. So before we break, this is where we are. Bears minus 500, Colts plus 400, Field, anybody other than those two teams, plus 400. Sticking around in Philadelphia, well, that's plus 1,000. At Shander Show, what are the odds? Fox Sports Radio, The Gambler, presented by Cure Auto Insurance.
Fox Sports Radio, the